So, hello everybody, welcome to this presentation about payload delivery for initial access during real-life engagement, such as red teaming or adversary simulation exercise. And welcome to the to this event, Red Team Village for Hack in the Box. First, I need to introduce myself. So, who's that guy? That's a quite good question. I'm Jean-Marie Bourbon, quite old guy from south of France. This is why I speak English like French guy, which is well known that people from France don't speak English very well, like me. Now living in Luxembourg since several years. You can find here some information about my LinkedIn or Twitter handle, KMKZ Security. I'm offensive security fanboy, and of course Red Team, Purple Team fan as well, since years now, and working as a head of cyber forensic and offensive security not department, but service, sorry, in Post Luxembourg. So I want to give a big up to my teammates. I already provided some talks, several years ago, at Night the Hack in Paris, and also in Dublin, in Switzerland, in Luxembourg, and now for this, awesome event, with awesome speakers. Not for me, of course, but, yeah, it's very, very good event. If you have any question, remarks, or something else, feel free to contact me. No problem. I will share more information, such as my email address at the end of the talk. Feel free to use it. It's not just for fun. It's also to be used in case of you want to discuss or something else. So, what we will discuss is the topic is how to gain the initial access, because as red teamer, we know that the initial access part is a key point, because we often say for pen testing that reconnaissance is the key. Here, in a red team engagement or adversary simulation, I would say that initial access is the key. Why? Because you don't have several tries. You need to gain remote code execution in only one or two attempts, and in the major case, it's only one attempt, and you have to be prepared and to have a working payload. I will present personal feedback first, so chapter 1, about a test I executed several months ago during the COVID-19 crisis, which is still ongoing, of course. And the test was a bit hard because of the limited attack surface, but we had successfully accomplished the mission, and I will just explain a bit the approach to have and to use in case of this kind of limited attack surface, and you want to execute your payload or whatever. So the chapter 2 will focus on mitigation and constraints, because before targeting a small attack surface, it's mandatory to understand the mitigation and the constraints you will have to deal with. So this chapter 2 is dedicated on this topic. The chapter 3 is more technical, is about TTP to use, the bypasses for a lot of mitigations, I would say, and detection, and quick wins from a blue perspective, but also red people should stay in this talk, because it's a blue perspective, but as you know, having a blue perspective when you are red is very useful. And the chapter 4 is how to concretely build your exploit chain from zero to remote code execution, so from zero to initial access, or using several attack vectors. And I will present a short demo based on this chapter 4. So the first chapter, we start. It's a personal feedback, like I said. So, how to deal with a very limited attack surface? So, the context here was the following. During the COVID-19 crisis, we received a query from a customer that said, okay, now, we have tons of people in the company that are working remotely. What we want to validate is that we control the risk and there is no way to pawn our company. Okay. So how to do that? You can select your own, techniques or whatever. Just, simulate a real life attack. Okay. We did a basic reconnaissance and we saw that there was a few services exposed. I mean, only one mailbox, one mail access, one remote access, and one website up to date. It was CMS. Okay. And with this, you have to find a way to breach the company. So the first question in this case is, okay, I need to use some realistic TTPs and I am aware about what happened in real life. Do I need an unpatched SMB service to gain initial access in the company? If it's the case, maybe you are not ready to this kind of exercise. Otherwise, just think that is it useful for the customer, because the customer pay you to pawn the company, but also to increase his IT security level, and pawning an MS 1710 vulnerable SMB service, it's not very useful, and they don't pay you for that because even Nessus can do that. So there is no added value. However, if you find a way to create and to imagine an exploit chain which is quite complex, that require to have a better understanding of the business and the techniques to use to concretely gain access on the internal network, it's more interesting because you will cover several steps, which, for example, if you use phishing, you will cover the mail gateway. Once the payload is executed, the first part will be a dropper. The dropper should be able to connect back on the internet. So it means that if you have proxy, for example, you have to deal with. But before that, you will have to deal with the antivirus. You will have to deal with AMSI and so on. So it's very challenging, and you will bring more added value to your customer like this. The first point is, yeah, be offensive and creative. You don't have to think like an auditor saying, yeah, I will test, for example, I don't know, I will take just a shitty example, but if you go on the website and say, yeah, the SSL certificate is not valid. Okay, come on. How do you plan to pawn the company like this? It's not very useful. So think like an attacker. Don't focus on technical part only, because yeah, it's more, the IT security is more complex than that. And, sometimes you can have some surprise due to the policies in place. A good example, one more time with phishing, which is very interesting because it's very used in real life. For example, in the ongoing campaign, Ryuk campaign, it's the initial access is done through phishing attempt, for example. Not only, it depends, but yeah, this is another topic. Sorry. And yeah, you can have several differences. For example, what if, I saw, okay, they have RDP or Citrix instance exposed on the internet without double factor authentication. Okay, great. What I plan to do is to, start a phishing campaign based on, email collected using OSINT investigation first. I created my list and I start phishing campaign to try to get some valid credential in order to log in on the Citrix and then finally to have an initial access on the network. Okay, that's great. I start the phishing and I collected several accounts. Okay, great. And I logged on the Citrix. I had my session. I said, yeah, that's great, and so on. And I had a network issue. Okay. I tried to log one more time using the same account on the Citrix and it failed. Okay. I didn't understand why first. And then, I said, yeah, maybe they changed the password. So, I checked each credential collected, and I saw that one password was company name 2020. What does it mean? It means that some users seems to use a generic password provided. For example, I guess from my offensive point of view, from the exterior, I guess it's because of the default password when you have your first account is company name followed by year. Okay. So what I did is just password spraying attempt, and of course, I had around 50 valid accounts using password spraying. Okay, so I had the initial access, and during the result presentation, I explained to this guy that okay, what happened, and they explained to me what happened is that we were informed that we were under attack, so we decided to reset password for the targeted user. Great. And I said, okay, but the problem here is that when you suspect to be under attack, what you should do is communicate first to any users and change password for any users, not only the users you think that are compromised. First thing. Second thing is that your password policy is not very good because you don't enforce the first logon change for the password. So what does it mean? It means that it's part of processes, which is not only about technique, but also about process. So if things were different, my result would be different also. Keep in mind that phishing is not that trivial because yes, that's a reality. If you want to do phishing every time because, yeah, phishing is quite fun and it's very easy to gain initial access, that's a mistake. I will explain why later. Think that if you collect credentials, for example, using phishing, what about multi-factor authentication? For example, do your customer use or implement double-factor authentication somewhere? If so, why do you want to collect some credential? It doesn't make sense. COVID-19 is quite good topic even now, so you can use it as a pretext, as a topic to start your phishing. But the best can be also to do some investigation first, reconnaissance, to mix with social engineering and so on. You have to be creative. That's what I said before. And imaginate complex scenarios. For example, I saw that they have an open position. Okay, I will contact the HR department through LinkedIn. I will say, yeah, I want to send you my resume. Can you give me an email address? Do you have an email address where I can send this? And yeah, I want to apply. Okay, this is the social engineering scenario. You will have one email address. So with this, you can identify the pattern. And maybe if you can collect a lot of username and, you can craft your own, email list, for example. And you can also identify if it's useful to deliver payload using phishing because there is no other option, or if you can grab credential. For example, if you target an hospital, grabbing credential is enough. Why? Because it's open to the public. And you can go inside the office and plug your computer somewhere or drop a Raspberry Pi or whatever, but you can reuse the credential. In other cases, it's more difficult. A good knowledge about offensive security is, of course, mandatory. That's okay. But also, IT security policies implementation is a good knowledge to have. And, incident response and investigation part can be a big plus, not only for the bypasses, but also for the remediation plan, and to don't only say, yeah, you have to patch your shit. No, this is not a remediation, you have to be able to say, okay, this fix is not present here, or there is a lack of hardening on this environment, for example. So you have to create an app locker policy like this. You have to challenge the app locker policy like this, and so on. You have to think deeper than just patch your shit. Be reactive means that, for example, if I start my phishing campaign at at, would say 7 p.m., for example. And, you know, I have a meeting, or not a meeting at, during the night, but, I have to go to the restaurant with my girlfriend, for example. Yeah. 1 hour later. Is it a good idea to start my phishing campaign right now? Because yeah, if a session open or I grab credential, I have to exploit it immediately and don't wait. Why? Because if you target a company that is well prepared and already did some exercise like this and simulation and so on, they may have some processes, and they will change password immediately, or they will take action immediately. And it's very different than targeting a small company that is under panic when something happens and have no idea, absolutely no idea on how to react. It's very different. So if your target, for example, is a big bank, you can be sure that you have to be reactive, because they may have a SOC service and so on. And if people suspect something, they will react immediately. So yeah, of course, you have to be reactive and to log everything, because in this kind of exercise, which is not a pen test, you should be able to provide a complete timeline on what happened and when it happened. It's very, very important. And the last point is, just don't do it sequentially, because saying, yeah, I will focus on website first, and then I will focus on phishing, and then I will do that. And no, it's not a good approach. An attacker don't work like this. An attacker will send a phishing campaign. If something happens, he will exploit it immediately. And in the same time, the phishing campaign is still ongoing, you know, because yeah, if you can have more sessions or more credentials, why to stop? You have to continue. So the idea is to mix the approaches to be more realistic. So the second part is about mitigation and constraints, because yeah, pawning is cool, but it requires tons of skills, because you have to deal with antivirus solution, proxies, AMSI, app locker, the patch management policy, if it's good or not, the blue team you will have to fight against, honeypot, canaries, for those that never had this in their engagement. A canary is a file, for example, a password.xlsx on a share. And once you access this file, it will trigger a use case and you will be flagged. So it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting for blue teamers as well. And so on. So you should have, this is the part where you should also have a blue mindset. So what we have to think before starting is technical mitigation, but as I said, not only. Be reactive. Yes, but why? Because your target can have a SOC service or something like that work 20 hours per day, every day. So it's happen, yes. The third part is don't try to pre-vesc immediately. For example, I start a phishing campaign because yeah, I like this. Why not? Or I exploited CVE on unexposed services. For example, a WebLogic server, which is more or less in the actuality right now. Okay, you have your initial access. What is the next step? The next step is to try to grab credential or to do lateral movement or something like that. But if you try to pre-vesc immediately, what will happen? If it's on WebLogic server, it's exposed on the internet, should be on a DMZ. Yes. If you try to pre-vesc, you will trigger immediately some alert or something like that, potentially, except if you are lucky or whatever. If you do that on a workstation, you can be sure that you will trigger an alert, because how do you plan to pre-vesc? You will drop what is the name? A Sherlock or something like that on the station. You will execute it. Okay. And what will happen? You will try to execute a malicious code. It will trigger an alert by the antivirus. Maybe it will try to use some suspicious API call on Windows or something like that. And what will happen? You will be flagged and you will be kicked from the network. So too late. Focusing on the domain admin privileges is also a common mistake because it's not the objective. Sometimes there is no need to focus and to escalate to domain admin privilege. Why to escalate to this privilege when you can access sensitive data without domain admin privilege? So it's not the objective. When you target a company, I know that it's very fun to have golden ticket. Yeah, I agree with that. But from a business point of view, the most critical is not the golden ticket, is the access to the data. So if you, for example, pawn the CEO or something like that, or yeah, CEO, you can access some juicy information, and in several cases, this guy will not be part of domain administrator. Phishing for shell is cool, yes, but keep in mind that you will have to deal with every security layer. Not very easy. You can trust me, and we will detail every step, each steps. Phishing for credentials is very cool, but as I said before, you have to first think about how to use the stolen credential. It's not that easy as well. If you can think about password spraying, because yes, from external point of view, it can be very, very useful, and internally it can be very, very useful as well. Because yes, password spraying is working pretty well. So don't forget about this. Keep in mind that each step should permit to imagine, validate and improve the use cases and the detection for your customer, not your skills. It's not research and development. The customer doesn't care about this. He doesn't pay for that. He pay you to execute the tests and to permit him to increase the IT security level in his company. He doesn't care about your research and development stuff. This is a part for a manager like me to say, guys, just take time to your team. You want to sell. You want to join the objective you have. That's okay. But if you want to bring added value, you should let your team some research and development time. That's mandatory because a good preparation is the key. For the technical corner, so the serious things are going here. We will discuss about TTP, evasion, and bypasses. The first point is that, yes, it's unpopular. We had a discussion on Twitter about this topic several months ago, but antivirus solution bypass is not a goal. It's just a step, because when you work on this kind of test, you should be able to do that. It's not about research and development topic, you know. It's just a topic like, for example, AMSI bypass or proxy that implement authentication or whatever. You can have tons of stuff to deal with, and antivirus is more or less one of the easiest topics. But of course, it depends on the solution and on the module that are activated on in the solution. So for this, I often use this technique. So this is why I decided to share it, because yeah, it works since years and it continues to work. So first, you have to keep in mind that dump detection in 2020 is a reality. So keep it simple when possible. Don't immediately go in complex and useless things like, yeah, I will compile my own C code to obfuscate using encryption. And why? Keep it simple. I will show you. String concatenation is still working and can permit to evade some antivirus engine first. So don't go in very complex stuff if you can use just string concatenation. If you want to evade heuristic detection and solve outgoing traffic through proxy issue, I will explain this part because it can be a bit strange. You can just use a stageless shellcode. So The first point is that why using stageless shellcode will evade heuristic detection. It's just because this test is based on a Metasploit free version. The payload by default will be, for example, a staged payload. Okay, it's a multi-stage. Why not? The problem is that when the stager is executed, it will try to download the stage 2, and here you will be flagged immediately because of the heuristic analysis, for example, and yeah, that's okay. And AMSI in several cases, if the solution support AMSI, you will be flagged here because of the calls that are done and so on. So the stageless shellcode will be loaded in memory and executed one time without any additional calls like this and network access. So this is why heuristic detection will be bypassed by design. For the outgoing traffic through proxy issues this is a common point. The idea here is that if you use, one more time, a multi-stage payload, the problem will be the following. You will execute your stager. That's okay. It will connect back to your CNC. That's perfect. And then it will execute the stage 2. And when the stage 2 will try to authenticate, so I talk about proxy that are not transparent, of course. It will try to go through the proxy, and the process will crash. Why? Because the stage 2 is not able to authenticate itself in the proxy. So this is why using a stageless shellcode is the key, because the stageless shellcode will be proxy aware and will authenticate through the proxy and just connect back immediately to your command and control. Of course, you can use multi-stage payload, but the problem here is that you will have to implement one more stage. Why? Because you will create a tunnel, and your final connect back will be forwarded through this tunnel, because there is no payload in Metasploit that supports proxy with authentication mechanism. So I know that several people will say, yeah, HTTPS support it. Okay, just try it with a proxy with authentication, and you will understand that no, in reality, no. And you also have some discussion about this on the Git repository of Rapid7 about this. And yeah, the authentication, depending on how it's implemented, is not supported by Metasploit at all. So just use a stageless shellcode. That's it. String-based detection for MSF templates. Yes, because by default, MSF templates are flagged. That's it. So just add some junk instruction, comments, concatenate your strings, and that's it. You will avoid some stupid detection like this. Okay. Avoid the automated tool usage is because that when you use Shelter or something like that, but Veil, I don't talk about Veil because it's very old and not working at all right now. But Shelter is still maintained, but it's not good. Why? Because some people and several people, like to be honest, I already did that myself, so shame on me, drop some payload on virus total. And the problem is that, yeah, as you know, it will be immediately signed and the rule will be deployed and it will be flagged immediately. And the problem is that if the payload is, for example, encoded using a random encryption key and so on, the problem is that the encryption itself, okay, that's okay. The key is random. Okay. But the algorithm used for this part can be signed. And then what is the project when your tool is flagged? You have to develop a new one. That's the goal. No, not really. And yeah, if you are professional, you should not do like that. Specifically for red team engagement or targeted attempts during your adversary simulation exercise. So the shellcode customization is the key, because it will permit to have, for example, a stageless shellcode customized that will bypass AMSI by design. So here it's finished. There is no antivirus anymore, and we can switch to the next challenge. And yeah, the last sentence is quite important. It's part of our fucking job to know how to bypass the detection mechanism. It's very important. And defense evasion techniques in general are part of our job. So one short example here. As you can see on the right part, you will see that in the red, the red area, you will see no payload here, because here should be the shellcode in base 64. And I removed this, meaning that the script here is just a basic PowerShell without shellcode. So the shellcode is not flagged. It's just the template. And as you can see, there is 5 detection based on just a PowerShell template, because it's generated by MSF Venom. And of course, it's flagged because, malicious. Okay, why not? Now, we can just imagine that, okay, I will use exactly the same payload, but I will add some junk instruction, some comments, and I will concatenate the DLL import, for example, for kernel 32.dll and so on. And as you can see here, that's magic. There is no detection at all. What does it mean? It means that we bypassed 5 engines only by adding some comment, some shitty instruction, and some string concatenation. Okay. So from here, we can start to work on the shellcode itself. So for the shellcode customization, there is no big problem. But if you are not familiar with the assembly language, it's time to learn. I'm sorry about that, but that's the reality and it's mandatory. And this is why you have some assembly stuff in some certifications such as OSCE or something like that. It's just because even if this certification was qualified as old school and too old and should be up to date, that's true, and it's done now. But at least you have the basics to know how to work and how to deal with antivirus solution. So, so in this part, you just have to learn a bit of assembly language to know how to adapt your shellcode. Few changes will break the signature, so that's pretty good. There is no need to develop completely your shellcode. So that's okay. You can use MSF Venom generated shellcode and just customize it a bit. But adding knobs everywhere will be flagged as suspicious and will increase the detection rate. So knopping everywhere is definitively not a good idea. If you do some changes, the first step will be to have a dedicated virtual machine to validate that the shellcode is not broken. Because, for example, if you set a value on EAX register, and during your customization you will reset this value, and then there is a register call, the shellcode will be broken because you did some changes that affect the register itself. So the idea is that, okay, just learn, understand what you have to do and what you do, and then once done, first validate the shellcode is not broken. I provide here 2 examples with the original shellcode first and the new one customized 1 year ago. Because as I said before, this technique is not new. I use this technique since years now, and it's still working because you can customize shellcode from tons of ways, and it can be flagged like this. It's not like using a tool that will be that will execute exactly the same steps. Here you can create your own, so there is no limits, you know. Important thing is that you have to adapt the HTA dropper, because yes, my example will use the HTA as payload delivery techniques. And you have to adapt this file to avoid a stupid string-based detection, because it's exactly similar. If you use the Metasploit HTA example, it will be flagged just because of the structure itself. So you just have to add some loops, variable, rename some variable. It's often enough, and then it will not be flagged. So we can say that, okay, PowerShell template customization and shell coding mean antivirus and IMSI are bypassed. Okay. You can find every details to craft your own on my GitHub. So it's publicity time. Sorry. And of course, you also need a brain, but I can't give you this. Sorry. And I don't want to share mine. One important point is also you have to adapt the TTP to your needs, because it's perfect for me. It was used in a specific case, and maybe it's not good for you. So just keep in mind that maybe it's required to think about this and say, okay, use this technique and this approach, for example, the HTA payload delivery techniques. And we say, yeah, HTA is good, but it's not usable in my case. Okay, I will use, I don't know, something else like WMI or, I don't know, whatever, I don't know. You just have to adapt, but the techniques to craft the payload itself is similar. A good payload should evade AppLocker and be proxy aware by default. If you don't implement this, you can have some stupid detection, because the AppLocker policy can block your payload execution and think that as an external attacker, you don't have logs or information. So if you drop your payload and nothing happened, you have no ID, absolutely no ID on what happened, where it failed. So the ID is by default implement AppLocker policy bypass. My favorite one is WMI plus XLS. Yeah, it's very good techniques. However, you just have to think that it should be proxy aware. And for this technique, it's not that trivial to have a proxy aware payload. It can be done, but using several stages. So several stages mean that you increase your detection risk. Using a generic payload delivery technique is very good. Why? Because you will have one generic payload that can be used for everything, for every vulnerability you want to exploit. For example, web vulnerability such as XSS, stored or reflected, or whatever. Social engineering, you can create a document with a URL and just add this on a stick, USB stick, you drop it and something access it and so on, or you can share it. Okay, there is tons of scenario, phishing, etc., and with the minimum changes. One of my favorites is to use BIF, because it's very good for payload delivery, fingerprinting, automation, and so on. And at least if the HTA payload delivery fail, you still have access to the browser, to the victim browser, and this is very important. However, to use this tool, you have to modify the hook.js name because it's flagged, and the content as well, and the cookies, because cookies are BIF hook value, which is not very, very food, you know. So if you have a proxy or something like that in your target infrastructure, you can be detected just because of that. So that's stupid. And yeah, avoid macro from my point of view, because yes, you will have mail gateway, you may have some sandboxes, and you will use this payload only for phishing. So it's not generic at all, and it's a lot of time to craft your payload, because yeah, macro can be used. Of course, it's used by threat actor, but the problem is that it's limited to phishing attempt. So the problem is that if you have stored XSS and you want to exploit the stored XSS, you can't use this document for the exploitation itself. But if you use HTA payload delivery, no problem. You can just insert an iframe and that's it. You will have your code execution. Of course, it's one-click remote code execution, but it's exactly similar for the macro. Fingerprinting the incoming request is important to deliver the right payload, because if the browser is Google Chrome, of course, there is no way to execute your HTA payload like this. So maybe it can be used also to use browser exploit. How to do that? You can use this script. It's a script that is on my GitHub as well. It's small and very dirty, but it works. You can just use this, or you can do it in cleaner way using Nginx configuration, because Nginx is able to fingerprint the user agent. The idea here is just to deliver the good payload, the best payload, depending on the browser, and to avoid stupid requests from wget, because I don't know, one guy is suspicious and say, yeah, I will try to access to see what happened and what happened if I open this URL. Okay, so just you can flag it as wget, so it's not what you expect, and you can redirect on a error page or something like that, or somewhere else. No, it doesn't matter. We don't matter, sorry. URL scanning bots, and so on. So yeah, you can avoid tons of stuff like this and just target exactly what you want to target. A pro tip here is just to stay aware about the JavaScript-based exploit in browser, because we saw today, for example, a V8, which is the Google JavaScript engine used by Chrome, for example, or Chromium, and we saw that a new exploit was released today. We also saw a publication a few days ago from the excellent Exodus intelligence team in the US that provides some techniques to target Firefox one more time, because it's not the first time, and so on. So staying aware about this can permit to increase your chance to pawn using a browser exploit. Sandbox escape is just okay. I just share with you this URL, which is a write-up about sandbox escape in Edge, if I don't do a mistake, and so on. There is tons of exploitation stuff. An emulation ID for the adversary emulation is to use this kind of technique, because it was used by Wizard Opium and Powerful to trigger the best browser exploit. So this TTP was used by these two campaigns, and maybe others, I don't know, but at least these two. Always use a proxy or airdropper, as I said, okay, but also using a valid user agent, because a lot of blue teamer can catch you if you use, for example, PowerShell user agent by default. That's a mistake. An empty user agent, another mistake. Or something that sounds not legit at all with a random name or something like that. So using a valid user agent can permit you to not be flagged as well. And it's not very time consuming. So yeah, just do it. Use a valid certificate. Yeah, that's very, very important because of the HSTS, the URL scannings, and also check your domain name, because, for example, here in Luxembourg and in several places, but we often work with banks here, and in the most places, if your request is focused on a domain that is not classified as business or bank or finance, you will be blocked, and an error will be triggered by the proxy. So it's very important to check your reputation first. And if necessary, you can ask for a categorization of your domain. You will have to wait 2 or 3 days. It depends, maybe less. And then you will be categorized as financial or whatever you decide. It's not that complicated. The only thing is that you should have a website and a domain that match more or less with what is expected. But in some cases, only it works web page is enough. It depends on the editor. So yeah, if, for example, you know that your victim is using Symantec, you can go on Symantec and just try. And yeah, it's a point that you have to think before, because yeah, if it failed because you are too lazy like me and you just dropped an index.php file by default, maybe the bot will consider that it's not enough and will deny your request. So you will have to do one more, and 2 days plus 2 days is it's already 4 days. So yeah, you have to anticipate a bit before your test. In some cases, if it's needed, so if you know that your target is using a sandbox mechanism, You can identify this using just a fake email to a bad address. For example, I don't know, clown at company.lol. And this address is not existing, so you will receive the error. And in the headers, you can identify sometimes the solutions they use. And using Google, you will see that, okay, there is a risk they use sandbox. Okay, why not? So I will implement some stupid evasion techniques just to have a quick win function to evade sandbox. Okay. Internal phishing will bypass sandbox detection. So yeah, that's the first point, because what is internal phishing first? Because it's a name I give to this technique. It's what happens when you have access, for example, to the public email. You have, for example, you have a OWA interface. You have access to one internal mailbox. Okay, you can target all the company using this mailbox. This will not go through the sandbox or the mail gateway, and you will bypass the detection by default. So that's the first point. In case you don't have this luck and you want to implement some stupid evasion techniques, but working, you can add some checks, such as, for example, if machine name is equal to username, it's suspicious, because if my machine is Windows 10 1234 and my username is Windows 10 1234, it can be a bit suspicious. You can also use DNS resolution to resolve, or to try to resolve, a fake domain. And if it say, yeah, it's resolved, it's suspicious as well. So my idea is to use a counter, and if machine name different of username, count +1. DNS resolution failed, +1. And if blah, 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 if score plus or equal, superior or equal 10, then we continue. So you can have a test like this. One other technique is to use encryption. So this is okay. But it's, from my point of view, it's a bit heavy. But yes, in some specific cases for red team engagement, it can be very useful and interesting. Yeah. I provided some URL if you need, and if you want more documentation about this. For the blue perspective now, create user agent based use case, because as I said before, if suspicious, you can trigger an alert, because there is no legit needs to use PowerShell user agent, empty, random, and so on. So just trigger an alert. Deploy or implement strong authentication mechanism on the proxy, because it's very, very challenging for a threat actor to bypass your proxy if it implements a strong authentication mechanism, or at least it will require several attempts. And several attempts mean that you will have time to detect it and to block the attacker. So this is very important. You can also, of course, block URL like IP address without any domain name, the raw.something, and the public paths such as Etherpad, Mozilla, and so on. Apply, monitor, and challenge an app locker policy. Yes. I explained before, because yes, if your app locker policy is quite strong and you use, for example, LOLBAS project as a reference, you can block the major part of the dropper that will be used to target your company. Keep an eye on PowerShell. Okay. So you should avoid the version 2. Okay. And, monitor the module logging with the event ID provided here. If you use V5, so just enable and monitor the CLM, constraint language mode, and script.logging using the event ID provided here. And of course, monitor what happened with AMSI by monitoring and by creating rule sets based on the event, AMSI event. And one more important thing is that PowerShell v6 is now present on Linux and Mac, and this will increase the attack surface, since this OS do not have, in the major case, antivirus solution. It means that we can use PowerShell as a dropper and execute what we want. That's the theoretical point of view, but we can execute payload using PowerShell based dropper, and there is less mitigation on Linux or Mac than a Windows system that is well maintained, monitored, and so on. So if you saw something suspicious, which is suspected as a dropper or lateral movement or endpoint security alert, just investigate immediately. Something happened, it's time to investigate. Don't wait to have a serious incident because it will be later. One very important point. As I said, never use highly privileged account to investigate, because it's a common mistake to say, yeah, I saw something on this server. Yes, I will take my administrative account to go on the server and investigate. Yes. And you suspect to have the server compromised, and you will use the highest privilege to investigate. So what if an attacker is on the server? He will just dump the LSAS process and you will have your credential. So just don't do this mistake. It's a common technique I already used several times. It works pretty well. Generate noise just to have one admin that's log on the server, and then too late. Create policies, because you have to prevent panic and you have to be trained on how to react. For example, as I said, for phishing, there is a big difference between companies that are well prepared and those that are no idea on what they are supposed to do. You can't ask to your users to you can't guarantee that any users will not open a link on your infrastructure. The question is that user awareness is cool, okay, but it's not enough. Otherwise, phishing campaign should fail. So what does it mean? It means that the problem is between the click and the reaction. Because if there is a click, how to react? What is the plan? This is what you have to challenge. Credential stealing. So as I said before, the idea is just to change all the passwords. Okay. Maybe you will have some issues. Some users will not be happy saying, yeah, but I worked and you reset my password. And yes, but I prefer to have this kind of discussion instead of calling the CSERT service to say, yeah, we are pwned. Can you start the investigation? What I'm supposed to do, and something, and so on, revalidate the patch management policy in a regular basis. Yes, because it's very important as well. We know that it's stupid. It seems stupid, but it's not. For example, for the zero logon vulnerability, tons of companies consider that if it's not exposed on internet, it's not critical. What I explain is that, yes, but what if you assume the breach? If someone plugs the computer on your infrastructure, if a phishing campaign is successfully executed in your environment, if blah 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 blah, what happened? So that's the point. Don't underestimate internal tests. That's exactly what I said before with the patch management. Assuming a breach is challenging your process and your hardening and so on, and will prevent you in case to have to deal with the crisis. Defense is not about magic boxes that will detect everything, even 0 days. Yes, of course. Yeah, like Batman here, don't trust vendors because they will say everything. For example, I know a vendor that tried to explain to a customer that he's able to detect every kind of 0 days, even race condition. Great. Okay. We often say, red teamer have to think like blue teamer. But keep in mind that you, blue teamer, also have to think like red teamer or threat actor, because this is important to know how to defend based on your knowledge on how to attack. So now we will focus on the final exploitation chain. Because I discussed a bit. Now it's time to explain in a concrete way how to build your own bypass to have a magic payload using HTA. The first step, generate classical PS1 file, which will be your PowerShell script that will be loaded by the HTA. So this can be done using MSF Venom. There is no problem with that. The second step come here because you will have to customize it a bit, you know, like I show you from since the beginning of this talk. The default template is flagged, so you have to customize a bit the PowerShell itself, and by magic you will bypass 5 editors. It's starting. In this file, you will have the base64 encoded shellcode, so you will have to extract it and customize it. So this is where assembly language is entering the game. And the step just after is to re-encode the customized shellcode in base64 and replace it in the PowerShell script. So you remove the automatically generated one and you replace it with your customized base64 encoded. So at this point, you will have a customized PowerShell template with that embed your customized shellcode encoded in base64. If you remember well, this is the red part where no payload here. And you have the from base64, blah, blah, blah. So this is where you will have to insert your shellcode. Okay. Then the easiest part, adapt your HTA file. That will be your dropper, consider as a stage 1. The point just after is just to say, okay, you are ready, but wait before starting. Validate that you have everything you need, because as I said, you have to be reactive. So what does it mean? It means you have to be fast. And fast doesn't mean to do a lot of mistake, like, for example, I will start a network discovery with a T5 minus A or using Nmap. No, it will be very noisy. You will be flagged. So for this, you should use some customized tool and so on. So prepare your tools before. This is why, as I said, preparation is the key. You can compile your own tool, test it. Everything is okay. You are ready. Now it's time to the point number 7. It's time to exploit, to execute your dropper and adapt to your scenario, of course, because here I talk about web app vulnerability, phishing, social engineering, but there is tons of ways to execute HTA dropper. So you can have the details about the TTP on the URL just on the bottom of the slide. So this is how it works using BIF. So on the right part, you will see the a kind of listener, which is our HTA PowerShell. So once you hook the browser, you will have to execute this, which is in the social engineering module. Okay. Once executed, we are on the phase number 2, where you can see that an iframe is injected. Okay. And once clicked by the victim, you will have your session opening in the part 3. You can see that, that's magic. The HTA is executed and now we have our session. Okay. So now it's demo time. So I will show you a working payload I did a few months ago. Yes. Please wait. So here, you can see that here is the Python simple HTTP server. We simulate a web server. Okay. Because we assume that you executed this using phishing campaign, for example. We don't care. And you have your listener, which is Metapreter reverse HTTPS, stageless, of course. And now we start. Okay. So at this point, you can see that the custom template is here and the stager is here. Stager is our dropper. Okay. And I will launch the listener here. Okay. I have one request, which is just a beacon from another test I did. So I will kill this session to avoid any misunderstanding. Okay. Session is killed. Now it's time to start the handler one more time. Okay. So now it's working. Great. It's listening on port 8080. Okay. Now we go on the Windows host, which is our target. As you can see, it was on September. Okay. Everything was up to date on this Windows 10 station. I will show you the agenda to say, yeah, it's September, okay, 2020, great. Here you can see that antivirus in real time is activated. The only thing that is disabled is the cloud protection because I don't want to drop my payload on the cloud. Here, the HTA is executed, so you have one click, which is the prompt. The HTA is executed. The dropper loads the PowerShell, and the PowerShell is containing the shellcode is one more time executed, in memory with all the bypasses. And now we have our session working. One important point is to try to show you that it's possible to use the Metapreter modules, because in several cases, this is where you can be flagged by heuristic detection, because it will try to do some malicious attempt by, for example, loading a DLL or doing some API calls or something like that. But here, it's working. And of course, since the antivirus in real time is activated, we also have AMSI by default. Okay. So yeah. So that's okay. Thank you very much for your time. Feel free to contact me if you have further questions, remarks, or whatever. Sorry for the poor English. As I said, I'm a French guy, but I hope that you will enjoy this event. Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizer. See you. Bye.